Good morning. I thought I'd share my experience so far of building a layout in a modern attic with all these timbers. Don't bother, it's just too difficult. Move house. Be far more easier to buy a 1960s house with an open attic rather than one of these. That's it. Ta-ra. Yeah, I thought you might want more than that. So I haven't covered all the build. I've basically skipped over a lot of bits that I have done up here. I don't see that there would have been any real interest in showing me screwing bits of timber together. But I'll show you a few things, some on my golfing camera there, and some on the phone because it's a lot more portable. Now my next job is back scene, and here I'm going to run into a few issues and I'll show you them. Well, the back scene will screw to the back of the table, but of course at the back of the table there's the stretchers which go to the attic timbers, so I'm going to have to cut out notches, and then at the 90-degree turn I'll have to support it above the board. So finding your sweet spot between here and there, that's out of shot, that was important to me, to get the right height for the board so I can get my maximum distance and I can get space for my back scene. Now I was asked, why didn't you change your loft ladder? Because obviously the way the loft ladder comes up and swings and then goes into its resting position has forced part of the board to go higher. So why on earth didn't I change my loft ladder? Well, I never thought of it. It never crossed my mind. Why didn't I build the entire layout at the same height? Why did I have that raised bit? Well, when it's raised, it's so close to the roof angle that there wasn't much room for the back scene, and so I was stuck with this height. Now, when you put your first stretch of timber between here and over there, that's just out of shot, you can get that one leveled up. But the next piece of timber that you put in is not connected to the first piece of timber you put in. So now you've got to get it leveled up that way and then leveled up that way and work your way round. And it's a very long job, and you hope that if you've got minor discrepancies between different timbers, that when you get round 360 degrees back to the beginning, that they are level and not an inch out. Incredibly difficult compared to, say, an empty room or an empty attic, where you can put one long piece of timber in, get the whole thing level, and everything is connected to that one long piece of timber, so the entire board is level. So as you work around here, there are bits which aren't quite right. One of the best things I did with this board was to seek out and find the 10 or 12 millimeter softboard. And I'll show you why with the phone. This softboard takes a pin very easily and holds it secure. But of course when you're going through 5 millimeter cork into timber, it of course bends. So when I used the 5 millimeter cork downstairs over this, what's it called? Is it OBS or something or other board? This cheap timber, basically. Then you end up with track pins. It's not going to focus for me, is it? But you end up with very, very bent track pins. And that's not good. So how have I powered this? I mentioned I used droppers every other joint. Now there's a reason for this. The first layout that I built up here, I treated it like a scale-electric oval or a train set oval on your dining room table, where you just apply power in one place. And of course it doesn't really work. I watched a guy on YouTube doing ballasting, and he was using 50-50 PVA and water, and he was splashing it on by the gallon. Literally, he used a huge amount of liquid. So of course I copied him. Now he was using droppers that he'd soldered to the underside of the rails on his 00 gauge layout. I'm using N gauge. And the connection between each pair of track, each joint, isn't that great to start with. So when you start splashing PVA around, I found that it got into the joints and basically made them insulating joints. And it kind of like didn't work. Surprise, surprise. So I switched to using something called ballast bond, which is in a small bottle and has a very fine applicator, and no matter how hard you try, you cannot put too much glue on. So I'll show you my droppers and we'll go underneath for a moment, just to show you what the wiring looks like underneath. Let's see if I can remember where my droppers were. There's one in there. And there's one here. But what's it look like underneath? Well, it's all rather neat and tidy. I know it looks confusing, but it isn't. And then we use a chocolate box and we connect to the droppers. And then we carry on and off to the next set of droppers. But while I'm under here, this is how I secured the fronts and the backs, with these little 90-degree bends. But it is rather neat compared to the spaghetti of the last layout. So basically that's how it's constructed. By using that cheap electrical 2-core cable from Screwfix, getting a 50-meter drum and going round here 3 times, I think I've saved a lot of money, because the alternative, if I can find it, so the alternative is buying drums and drums of this black and red wire, or whatever colour you prefer, which is, I don't know why they charge a fortune for this stuff. And then instead of running 1 wire per track, you're running 2 wires per track. And because I've got 3 tracks, then you would have 6 of these running underneath, and it would look like spaghetti. And if you've got a problem, it'd be much harder to trace where the fault is, because it's not too difficult to wire the wrong set of droppers to the wrong wiring loom underneath. Now if you're using DCC, I think you create this anyway, but if you're sticking with old-fashioned DC like me, it is well worth buying the droppers and putting them in. Then you've got power all the way around the circuit, and if you do get a dodgy joint, if this joint in the middle is a bit dodgy, then those 2 lengths of track are going to be fed power from each direction. The viaduct. Now the viaduct, that length is not a kit. You get a Metcalf kit, and it's about that long, and it has an end section and an end section. So I built one with the one end section, I built another with another end section, and the one in the middle I didn't put either end section on, and then cobbled them together. Now I've since spotted there's a guy on YouTube who will build that for you to a much higher standard than I can. So if you want 3 Metcalfe kits joined together, he'll do it for you, and it'll look a fair bit better than mine. But what was really important about what I did up here so far? Obviously lighting, having proper lighting going all the way round, and these tubes from Screwfix are quite cheap. I think I mentioned the price in a different video, so I won't mention it again, mainly because I can't remember. The insulation, hundreds of pounds. Was it 600 quid for the insulation? I'll tell you what that has done. Now, when I was up here in the summer working, and we actually had 1 or 2 hot days, the underside of this was warm. The heat was being transmitted through, even though there's a 50mm gap between that and the filthy, what's the stuff called? The stuff that goes between the tiles and the fresh air here, that kind of like sheet. It was horrid. There's a 50mm gap there, but even so the heat still radiates through. And that's where this little friend over here comes into play. Now that cost me more than I expected. I was expecting about £800 and it cost me £1,000. If I'd had loads of money, I would not only would I have had 2 windows, I would have had double width. I'd have had 2 proper width windows. And that would have made a huge difference on a hot day. But once you open that up, and you've got bedroom windows open, you do get a through draft, and it does get quite... It does cool this place down. But this is the 30th of October, and it's about 10 or 11 degrees outside, and it's not 10 or 11 degrees in here. It's very comfortable. In fact, I don't even need my jumper on up here. And of course, while the hatch is open, any heat in the house from cooking, etc., is going to find its way up. I've found some drafts on a windy day, and I bought some sealant, and that's another job for me to do before it gets really cold in January, is to start sealing cracks, because this stuff is not perfect, especially right up here in the top and round the window. The guys who fitted the window didn't seal it with mastic or anything, so there's a draft that comes round the window frame. Thanks guys, £1,000, and you couldn't even afford a tube of mastic, buggers. But the most important thing that this has done for me is it's turned it into a clean room. Instead of all the filth that was hanging down. You know, when I started way down there under the eaves, starting to put in the timbers and starting to put in the insulation, I would come out and my hair was black, which yeah, it needs to be black, but there isn't much left. I've just had a haircut. But yeah, it was absolutely filthy in here. So if you're coming up into an attic to do a layout, if you do not cover your rafters with something, even if you don't go the whole hog like I've done, if you do not cover your rafters, you've got that filth coming down. Because as I say, I built a layout up in here in about 2001, and then it kind of like got neglected due to family issues and what have you. And when I did come back up here in 2010, it was black. The whole thing all the way round was filthy black from all the crap coming off the underside of the tiles. So if nothing else, you really must seal the underside of your rafters with something. Even if you, as I say, you don't go the whole hog and insulate it, you gotta keep the filth out there and not in here. I can't think of anything else to say right now about my experience so far. you'll notice that I painted all this the first time around. I'm going to be repainting. There's lots of knocks and what have you. Thing I used was vinyl silk emulsion, because then that makes it kind of like smooth and shiny as opposed to matte, and again it will pick up, if it's matte, it's, you know, you're going to be marking it. Not that it's hugely important. And talking about that, normally you paint the sides here, the part of the layout you don't want people to look at, you paint it black. Well, I got a tin of white paint, so I'm going to paint it all white for a change. What else? What else? Well, nothing else really. Ah! The polystyrene risers from... What's the company called? I always forget the name of the company. But the polystyrene risers, they don't take a track pin. You've got to cover the top of them anyway, because when you do your ballasting will fall down all the cracks. So the thing to cover them with is glue your risers down and then glue cardboard over the top. Thin cardboard. Just glue some thin cardboard over the top. Then it will take a track pin and hold it, rather than put a track pin in and it just lifts out the polystyrene. And then of course you don't lose 4 ton of ballast. So yeah, I think the most important part about coming in the attic is turning it into a room. If I had to, I could, well, it wouldn't fit through the hole, but if I had to, I could bring some sort of a mattress up here and sleep in here now. And I certainly couldn't do that before I did that. Did a window and did some decent lighting. See you in the next video, which might involve a new locomotive. Ta-ra!